Pardon?
No, 30 days on the 31.
All right, and recording? All right, well, it is 30 and I call this meeting to order, so let's make the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first item on the agenda is roll call. Have roll call, please, Sam. Mayor Butler. Present. Trustee Nixon.
Present.
Valentine.
Present. Here.
Trustee Smith. Here. Trustee Martel.
Here.
Trustee Weber.
Present.
All right.
She has to break the tie between presence and here.
Yeah, it's 2-3, so we can't agree on anything.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion?
Moves to approve the agenda.
Second. All right, discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. All right, new business. Discussion and direction to the town attorney and interim director or interim administrator on code language specific to Ordinance 2020-01 water moratorium. Leslie or Nick, who wants to take this one?
Well, I'm going to turn it over to Nick, but I think we already talked about our problems trying to interpret this. You know, I think that we need to align the code with what everybody, how they think it should be interpreted as opposed to struggling with it. And, you know, I'll just use a couple examples. The school districts for sale, or the schools for sale, they have taps. Most inquiries, they want to build residential units. If there's enough tap room, do they get to do that? We don't know. So we have to figure this out. So Nick, do you want to go over your memo?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to first start by clarifying something. Some of you may have noticed in your review of the memo that it kind of starts at an assumption that the board would want to revise the moratorium to create exceptions. And I know that's not necessarily the case. So we're also recommending a clarification memo if the board would like to continue on with what we think the board's current interpretation of the moratorium is and how the board has interpreted it in the past of prohibiting the extension of even water delivery pipes within a property that's already legally served. So in either case, whether the board wants to create exceptions for properties already legally served where they can extend pipes within the property, not necessarily increasing water service provided to that property, or whether the board wants to flat out prohibit the extension of water delivery pipes within a property legally served. We're still recommending an amendment just so it's clear to everyone who applies to the town for a permit to develop property that they can or can't receive water service. So that's the important clarification that we're trying to get at tonight. So one of the, as the board has pointed out before, and the memo previously provided to the board has pointed out, the definition of tap is really what's problematic. Also, particularly the conflict between the two definitions, one being the general definition of tap in chapter 13 and the other being that of the ordinance passing the moratorium on the sale of taps itself. So that's what we're trying to get at tonight, and appreciate any guidance the board will provide.
Okay. So it seems like first thing you need to look at is the definition of tap and how the board would like to define that in the code. So my assumption is we need to change the code to define tap to make sure that we have it correct. So in the code, so in the moratorium, its tap is defined not only as the connection, but also to include the extension of water delivery pipes. But also, isn't there an issue with water delivery pipes as those pipes that the town actually delivers water to the tap, and then those pipes within the property itself? So we have a conflict there as well, correct?
That is correct, Mayor. There is no definition of water delivery pipes. So it's hard to advise applicants for development in the town what exactly they're permitted to do and what they aren't permitted to do, because that's there is no definition for that term. So just to use an example, and I'm sure the board has thought of many examples and seen many more examples than I have, but let's say somebody in a zone district permitting duplexes wants to create a second unit on their single family home, which would be a permitted use under the code in certain zone districts. It's unclear in the code right now as it reads whether they're permitted to extend a pipe to deliver water to that second unit. Of course, we know that that could result in an increase of water service provided to the property overall. So that's another one of the issues, and it really gets to the crux of the intent of the moratorium. Was it intended not to increase water service provided within the town overall, or was it intended just to prohibit the connection of additional properties that aren't already legally served to the town's water supply system?
Okay, so if we were to split this and address just the issue of the issue of definition of tap, and just say restrict it to, just the connection to water system, and then deal with the issue of the definition of delivery of, delivery pipes and service pipe, and maybe stuff that out. Do you think that would make the issue clear?
I think you have to decide who you serve during the moratorium. Because I'll give you an example. It's clear to me that the sale of a tap is not allowed. So I recently had yesterday, someone went to me to tell them that they could buy a lot and put a modular on it. And Dan and I immediately said, well, does it have a tap? No tap, no development. That's clear. Where it's less clear is, say somebody has a tap in the R2 zone. They want to build a second unit adjacent to, maybe even convert part of their home into a second unit. The code, the way I read it, is clear that you can't get another tap, but you can have an additional unit on a tap as long as they're both metered. But is that what you intended? There's controversy about that. It's clear to me that if they needed a bigger tap, like if they had to go from a 3/4 inch to a 1 inch, that would not be allowed, because that's a sale of an additional size tap. But if they could do that, and then another example is the school. They already have taps. They're probably well sized to serve all kinds of units. According to the code, they could develop units and meter them, and that would be okay. But that's not what I think some people believe the moratorium was meant to do. And that's where we're getting. So that if you can decide what you think should be allowed and not allowed, then we can work into the code and the definitions to make that work.
So our decision to say then is, what do we want the moratorium to mean? Right. Okay, yes, sure.
I move that we direct the attorney and interim town administrator to rephrase the language in ordinance 2020-01 and section 13-131 to indicate that the moratorium applies to additional units as well as additional lots or additional meters.
Do I have a second on that?
So that's a discussion, I'll second that.
Okay, Bill, discussion from the board.
Okay. So I have a visual aid for everybody here today. And I know that this is going to be a little bit hopefully it's not patronizing because I want to make sure that it's clear and basic. So what we have is and we'll do it out here. Okay, this is our town water supply. And we can guess based on how big this is about how much is in there, but nobody knows exactly how much might be included. So we're gonna guess that this is maybe where the water is, okay? That's our supply, maybe. It could be less, it could be more. We don't know, and it's gonna change. We can stop leaks. We have decreasing rainfall. We have all kinds of factors that might affect it, but we're talking about like right now. So the danger, the risk that we're talking about is when we make our demand, well, right? If that's our use, our demand, what happens is we have to make some very hard decisions in this zone. As I see it, as I understand it, the moratorium is meant to keep us under this line below our best guess, right? So that we can continue to serve water. So what we have right now is there is some I need to get some water. Down, get some water. Who else wants water? How many more glasses can we fill? I'll take it. Right? Okay. Want some water?
Get it while you can.
Yeah. How much more is in there? Okay. So what we're talking about is, as we all understand it right now, these are additional tabs, right? So we're saying we're not doing this in units. Yeah. These are additional tabs. Okay. These are additional tabs. So what's a tab? We have other tabs that we're obligated to fill. We're going to get water. You're guaranteed water, right? So what I'm hearing is an additional unit, something like Mary gets more water. She already has a tab. She gets more. Baby gets more. She's in R3. John, you're not one. Sorry, give me anymore.
Damn, I want one.
You want one? He's in R2. Okay. So hopefully you can understand the point here is that by increasing the use on existing users, or allowing existing users, what we're doing is driving our demand up to a level that may be more than what we can sustain. Okay, and the risk is this, as I see it. The risk is this. We're talking about, let's pretend there's no moratorium. Everybody gets some, right? Everybody gets some. This is a guy here, and this is a guy here, and that's a guy there, and that's a guy. Uh-oh, okay, now we're out of water. What do? We tell all these people, and Dave, who hasn't even begun to use his tap, that they don't get water. Do we take some from everybody and try and divvy it up, right? Try and spread it out evenly. My mind, the solution is to enforce the moratorium to a level that is below what the engineers state that we have confidently. And at such time as we can say, well, we're sure that we have higher production now. We've got the clock online. We've had 2 years of good rain. We think it's going pretty good. We're going to add 10 more units, 10 more taps, however we're going to define it. At that time, we can change it. All we have to do is change the law. The risk of being under is that we have unutilized water that we're not, I suppose, making money from, or I don't know precisely if we can elaborate the risk of being under I would like to hear it because I feel that the real risk is in going over what we have. That's basically what I have to say. Thanks.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
I think in this discussion, we need to go back to what the width of voters. Right, I mean, we had the loss of water in 2019, it was catastrophic, it freaked out the town. And so the voters put in a moratorium. We didn't put in this moratorium, or the previous board, the voters did. So what did the voters really want? From the ones that I talked to, and when I talked to people before the vote, I didn't know which way it was going to go because I got both sides. But the people that did want the moratorium didn't want any more use put on the system until such time as we could do two things. Justify that we had a sufficiency to cover them as well as potential future growth. And second, that we had the capability to deliver the water, that the quality of our delivery system could produce the volume of water that we needed. And I feel that I know that the delivery system is not there, right? We used to have 3.5 million gallons of tank storage online. We're down to 2. We used to have 2 treatment plants with redundancy in them. We're down to 1. So we're kind of running on the edge here. And I think what we should do is, my feeling about sufficiency is that we probably, having done the springs myself, walked them, we have a lot of water up there. We have a real problem getting it down to us here. And so I don't think we should be adding any more usage to the system till such time that we get at least the clock plant online and we have that stuff back in set.
Mr. President.
Well, I was getting at a fundamental thing before trustee Martin made his motion. The fundamental thing is, do we want additional use or not? In the previous council, we had interpreted very strictly. I remember that meeting. We interpreted very strictly the water moratorium. And then we had a legal opinion that made us lawful on it. When Jeff Conklin gave us a legal opinion saying, well, we don't know about the taps. And then I think administratively, people started kind of opening it up. Oh, well, geez, if that's what that legal opinion is, and perhaps we can be a little more loose about ADUs and things like that. I think the demonstration that we just said was well put, because that's the essence of the issue here. Do we want to put more demands on the system or not? That's the fundamental question. I think we should answer that first and then go down the road.
Okay, other members? Yes, Wade. You were first.
Oh, okay. Well, I just want to read the moratorium introduction language, which is moratorium suspension of the sale of domestic water taps that the town of Hampton is not legally obligated to serve on the effective date of this ordinance. And then the tap then has that the water delivery pipe, which is problematic because we don't really have a definition. But to me, the moratorium said we don't want to be asking for the use of any more water than when this was put in place. So to me, I have always interpreted this, and I've said this before. We built a garage on our property. We did not take water to that garage because I interpreted that as a violation of the moratorium. And to me, I don't think the tap is an issue. There's no new taps available, period. But it's this water delivery pipe issue. So here are two things. First of all, we don't know if somebody's putting in another bathroom, which in my mind violates the moratorium unless they get a building permit. And if they're not getting a building permit, it's going to happen with, out from under our nose. We're not going to know. But I think in order to maintain the intent of the public when they voted for this, we need to define the service line in the house. That is the problem here, is the water delivery pipe is what the town gives to the household or the commercial building. I think we need to replace water delivery pipe with service line in the house. And in my mind, people are not supposed to be adding another bathroom. That is an additional use on the system. And they sure shouldn't be adding water to a second building, whether they're, as long as they're, and especially if they're not violating the zoning code. To me, this was very draconian. I think it was intended to be draconian because we were in a mess. And now it has been, for the lack of another word, watered down, that some things are okay and some aren't. I'd like to go back to a very prescriptive, no, you can't add another bathroom. As an example.
Yeah. Well, certainly, I don't really care what the moratorium said. No, I don't mean that in a legalistic sense. Of course, I care. We have it. That's why we're here today, so we have to deal with it. But I think the situation is fluid. And what I'm referring to is housing shortage. When I probably voted for the moratorium, I don't remember. I certainly am of that mindset, but now I'm realizing we need to, let's put it this way, not necessarily open things up, but it's a much more complicated situation. We need to solve that part. Now, that's not the discussion today, but it's a really important part of the context of what we do. I think there is sort of a gorilla in the room or in the town, and that was people who don't want the town to expand. They don't want development. And it's very, very hard. I'm not saying you can't tell, I'm just saying it's very, very hard to say from that vote on the moratorium, whether people were worried about the water and freaked out because we ran out, or saw it as a great way to stop all development. Who knows? It's hard to say. And I'm just saying, I don't want to hear any claims one way or the other. So anyway, back to the main thought here. I hear often that we just kick the can down the road. And in talking to folks here in the administration and staff, my understanding is the housing study or whatever it's called will have a report by mid-year, and there's another engineering report which may well give us some numbers on how much water we do have. And so that problem, I hope we can deal with soon. Soon being 6 months, perhaps 5 or 6 months. In the meantime, though, we don't have the, I think it would be a mistake to open things up and create the new Wild West, on water taps, until we have that figured out. So I guess what I'm addressing here is, yeah, we do need to redo the language so that more water, I think the way to put it is, there's all this stuff about pipes and development and all that, but what we're really talking about is, does more water go out the pipes or not? Is that the issue? And I think until we deal with that other stuff, we can't let more water go out the pipes. That entails the whole business of ADUs and short-term rentals and more development and all kinds of things. So anyway, I guess what I'm really doing is saying we're not really kicking the can down the road, and we're also not saying never ever on line extensions and new taps and everything. But it's not going to be, it sounds to me, if I understand correctly, it's not going to be a long, long time before we do solve these other problems, which I think are even more fundamental to the problems in town than the water itself. Sorry, that was a bit long, but I'm done.
Okay. Right.
We already have a system of, we charge by the size of the pipe as called the tap. And minimum size of a tap for a residential unit is 3/4 of an inch. I think that possibly we can make this whole problem go away by stating that you have to have a minimum of a 3/4 inch pipe to the residents in order to supply sufficient pressure. Now, I know that if you have a duplex or say you have a duplex and you have a mother-in-law apartment in your area and you're running off a 3/4 inch tap or 3/4 inch pipe, that's what supplies the water. If everybody's showering, washing machines going, the dishwasher's going, they lose pressure. There isn't enough pressure in that pipe. It's not physically large enough. So if you want to put, say, 4 units on a tap, you need at least 1.5 inch pipe supplying that. And I think that's the easiest solution to all of this. Making the minimum residential pipe, supply pipe, 3/4 of an inch. And if you put 2 on there, I believe an inch will handle that. But if you put more than 2, you're gonna have to have an 1.5 inch water tap with the also every user is gonna have to have a water meter. So, you know, we're running into some problems here. We can't really supply more people now. According to what we've said, and the moratorium did call for an engineered solution, where we had the engineers guaranteeing that we'd have enough water supply to supply the town. And I think that's probably our biggest holdup. I know that we've had disruptions and problems and everything else, but we need to know how much is up there first, coming out of the springs. And once we have at least a year's knowledge of the average for that 1 year, I'd like to see 20 years data, which will give us a lot better data. But we need to know when we're going to be short of water. And I know by anecdote that in September, October, and November, December, we're running short of water. It doesn't fill the tanks as fast as we're using it, and we slowly go down. And then long about December, when the August rains have trickled down through the street and get to the springs, we get a bump in production. So the biggest thing is not that we have lots and lots of water in June. The biggest thing is what do we have in October, November? And that's where we should be more cautious. But I think the easiest thing of all is just demand that a 3/4 inch minimum size supply pipe to a building and a water meter is necessary. And that precludes somebody that's on a 3/4 inch line now, just adding on to their water use.
That's already our requirement now.
But if we add on the additionals, that's
Right,
the thing.
that's the,
They don't, that's where the push is, right there. And the simple thing then is you have to buy a 1 inch tap and then run it and split. Each one gets 3/4.
That's right.
I'd like to reply to a couple of points that came up. I guess John's point about development versus water use and the direction of that, I suppose, is definitely a subtext to this whole conversation. But at the end of the day, the reality is the water will limit that. I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about, is like whatever development happens eventually becomes limited by some physical factor, either space or supply or some kind of resource. And our limiting resource, I expect, will be water. So I think that you're right. It is kind of the same question, but it's the same answer, I believe, at the same time. And regarding Rick's question about pipe size, the water pressure, or at least now, I don't know what happens after the PRVs are online, but we have I'm pretty sure we have a 3/4 inch service to my building. And we have up to, this last year, we had up to 15 people at a time in that building. 4 bathrooms, 2 kitchens, washing machine, washer going almost all the time. And water pressure was great. It was too hot. Yeah, I had to get it restricted. So I turned it down. So as PRVs are come online, I expect that to change, hopefully, because that will reduce our underground leakage. But the problem, I mean, creating a legal barrier based on that distinction, I think kind of makes sense, but the practical barrier of it doesn't apply on our town. Beyond that, I guess my motion was to indicate no additional units. And I think that speaking to Paige's thoughts, it really should also include not just additional units, but like expansions to the same unit setting. You know, somebody wants to append a bathroom so that they can create kind of a side, you know, it's technically not a different unit, but now it's a new bathroom on the side of it that serves just as one bathroom. and they share a kitchen, and it's not 2 units because it has 1 kitchen, but they also have 2 more people living there now. Or, you know, whatever convolution, whatever additional demands that are placed on the system. And I know that we've had people write some very charged letters about this process, and I understand it's going to make it'll have a very strong effect on how people live in town. But I think at this time that we make sure that we can all live comfortably rather than bring more people in and live less comfortably.
Thomas, would you repeat your motion, please?
I can't remember it. Something that lost it too.
Yeah.
It was something like I direct a interim town administrator and attorney to revise the language in the ordinances to indicate no additional units as well as no.
Not you specified,
Yeah, there was,
you had specific sections that you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
did you get it, Sam?
To rephrase ordinance 2020-01 13-131 to indicate it applies to additional units.
Okay, repeat that again louder.
I'm sorry. Said to rephrase 2020-01 13-131 to indicate it applies to additional units as well as taps.
We're gonna have a contest page.
Well,
Ladies are always first.
All right, just a minute. Units. All right, page.
I would like to amend that because there is no definition for a unit.
Yeah, there is.
It's a household unit, and I feel like because it needs to be amended to say household unit. Because what's a unit? There is no unit in our code. It needs to be household unit, which is in chapter 13.
Yes.
And it is defined.
It's in the definitions.
All right, yes.
So there's a problem with that.
Yes.
Okay.
Chapter 16.
So the problem is, in another inquiry, somebody wants to turn in something that was, I don't know, an office into a bar and restaurant. That's additional water use. So you can add on commercial units as well within a building. You can develop a new commercial unit with one that uses water because it has its own restaurant.
So making it just household unit is not.
Right, it's not broad enough. It's not inclusive.
I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say that if you confine it to household units, we know what to do with residences. What do we do with businesses?
Right. And definition in chapter 13.
Well, my suggestion is, it's. What if we were to go back to the heart of this and just say that we want to revise the language in the code to make sure that no water above the water usage at the time of the water usage at the time.
Water usage, what it was at the time the moratorium was voted.
Right, something like that.
At a date certain.
Well, at the time it was done, but again, we can't get too specific on that. Now, if somebody has 4 people show up and there's a big party in town and the water usage goes up and we can track that via the water bills, I mean, you can't really do that either.
So there's
Yes.
a problem with that too.
Yes.
So what is water usage? Does that mean the use of how many gallons that they used that month that the moratorium was passed?
Yeah.
So that's why, that for a tap, when you do your engineering to build a structure, you have to size the tap based on the number of water using facilities. So if you've got like a mansion, you're not getting a 3/4 inch tap because you've got a ton of bathrooms and stuff. There's a house in Aspen that has 32 bathrooms. And that's its own sewage system. You know which one I'm talking about. Yeah. So, one thing that's for sure is the size of tap limits the amount of water use that you can have in that, for that property. So that would be a way that you could say, that's why I said it's clear to me that that someone can't come in and say, I have a 3/4 inch tap, I need a 1 inch tap. That's the sale of a new tap. See, you see how this gets really dicey for those of us that have to read the code. And the problem is that I think a lot of people don't understand is that when I get a call that comes in, it doesn't matter what the intent of the moratorium is. It matters what's in the code, because that's what legally you can require. And that's what we're trying to clean up.
So Nick or Leslie, do you have language that you would suggest to us that we could use that would reflect what the board is basically saying is we want to keep with the original intent of the moratorium, which is not to add water usage? Yes.
The one thing, and Nick, please jump in and correct me, that where I struggle is that it says in your code you can have one tap and a lot of units as long as you meter them. So that might be what has to be clarified, is that you can't put in additional units. And for me, a unit is any standalone land use. It's a new house, or it's a business that's separate from the other businesses, you know, a business space or whatever. And that you just say that for the moratorium, that no additional meters may be added to a tap, something like that.
And every unit, every using unit has to have a water meter.
Because it says clearly in the code that every unit has to be metered.
Yeah.
That's the problem that we have. Someone doesn't have to buy a tap. They can create new units as long as they don't go over the size requirements of that tap. So let's say they want to, you know, I don't know how many at this point people want to build a second unit in their house. A 1-bedroom or a studio. Can I do that? Well, in the code right now, I stopped saying this because I realized that when I looked at the code and I saw what I saw, that wasn't what people were understanding. You say that no additional meters can be issued. Now, we do have one situation where I think we need to provide an exception. We have a landowner right now who already has apartments, separate apartments. They were never metered because they were constructed prior to the time that the meters were required. And this person wants to meter those units so that people can get an individual bill. And I wouldn't want to preclude that. These units are already in use. But, I would say the way that you would restrict new units coming online that can use water is to say, we're not issuing any new meters, except if it's already in some sort of a pre-established residence that's being used.
But then that brings into the question the 50 to 100 mother-in-law units we have in the house, in the town, that are not, they're not legal units as such.
Yeah.
But that's not a moratorium issue.
Right.
That is a zoning, that's another issue to be dealt with.
Yeah.
That's an enforcement issue, yes.
Right. Yes, Thomas.
So I don't see how enforcing a requirement for a meter for a unit would affect or prevent somebody from, say, adding, like I was talking about, adding a studio like room, or like adding additional room on their building and an additional bathroom on the building that exists, because it's still the same unit. So we still have expanded.
The plumbing code is quite clear on how many bathrooms and how many bedrooms you can have on a
Before you
size.
upsize your tap, before you have to upsize your tap. But you're right, people are going to do things within their home that you won't know about.
Right, exactly.
There is no way you have total control.
Right. Yes.
Well, it's just, we don't have total control, but again, it gets down to that definition of a delivery, water delivery. We are not using the proper term currently in the definition for tap. So if we created, and we kind of need to do a water delivery definition because there are so many terms in our code that are not defined. I have sorted it out. So that to me would be no new taps, no new meters, no new extension of water delivery lines.
But again, it's service line versus delivery.
But I'm saying we create a definition for water delivery line and substitute that.
Well,
Water.
creates.
Yeah, right. Well, anyway, that to me would give us the three legs of this stool. No new taps, no new meters, and you should not be extending your water. What's the term we're using? Service line, which is what I think he's meant, was the service line on a person's property. Not the delivery line is what we own. Okay, that's my thought.
Okay,
Mary,
yes,
I think that one thing, the board seems to be agreed that we don't want to put any more demand in the system until we can prove it. And the question is how to affect that. Demand is put on the system by adding people to the system.
right.
It's not by adding bathrooms, it's not by adding showers. The house has an X number of people, no matter how many bathrooms they have. I can only use one bathroom at a time. And I think that if we just restrict it in such a way as to prevent new users, and the meter is one way to do that, because you put in an ADU, you've added people to the system. And that has to be metered. So that's an effective tool for controlling that. One of the questions is, what about metering in a commercial environment? Are we requiring meters if there's an expansion to a commercial? Like we have a building that's being split up, it's being subdivided, like the Marston building was.
I have to look that section up just.
So that would hold the residential growth until such time as we could prove we have the water and we could prove we could deliver the water by just dealing with the meters, but I'm not sure what the commercial aspect of it was. And then echo quickly on Rick's point. This year, we did reach a diurnal point where the tank was falling during the day and filling at night. We turned in the Rover Springs, which has kept us okay. But we are currently dumping into a ditch about 280 gallons per minute of high-grade spring water because we have no ability to treat it or store it. So
At the clock plant.
at the clock, yes.
Yeah. So, okay, so if we just keep taps and meters and let service lines go, because I agree with Dave on that. I mean, how many showers can one person use? And frankly, if we want to add people to the system, if I take 3 people into my house, nobody's going to know that I took 3 people into my house. I'm still going to have the bathrooms I have and the showers I have. And there are 3 other people living in the house with me. And we can't regulate that.
Of course not.
Yeah, so, yes, Dave.
It will be interesting to see how people try to get around whatever we pass. Seriously, but I do want to say one thing about what happens inside a house. Jill and I just downsized to a very small house of 720 square feet. There's 1 bathroom, but we're in an R2. And if we wanted to build another bathroom and put another master bedroom onto the house, what's to prevent us from doing that under the current code? Now, we chose not to do that when we moved in because I felt there was a water moratorium. So Paige is using a personal example. I'll use one too. But what about that piece? I'm trying to be the devil's advocate on what would happen about people that are with, because there was a legal argument we had when we started loosening up, so to speak, earlier, and that was that people have a right to use, and we're taking away those rights. Like I have a R2 zoning right now, so I have a right to be able to have a duplex. So that's a question for Nick, or how we would deal with those rights, because people could come back at us and say, hey, you've taken away my ability to be able to increase that property value first.
And that's what has been Nick and Mike's concern about the interpretation of this ordinance, is that we're going to get a challenge to it. So let me read you this section. It's 13-170, individual meters. Separate meters shall be required for each residence or commercial building.
But not.
So maybe we need to look at that. properties sharing a common line feeding through one property to another or utilizing a single meter for 2 or more units or serviced by only one water line shall be required to install separate meters so that the service to each user is independent from the other. So that could be applied to businesses, but I think I'd want to talk about that with Nick, if he felt that was also true, that you would have to, if you had, you know, this one building that I'm thinking of that has caused Dan and I fits is that they would have separate businesses. So like there's a one big building, but there's going to be a restaurant, bar, and there's going to be offices next to, should those be separately metered? And then each household unit shall be serviced by a separate water meter. That's very clear. Multiple household units in a single building owned by a single entity prior to the enactment of this article, which is the case of this woman that has apartments that are not metered, but she wants to get metered, may be served by a single water meter under the condition that all units are included in one bill. So that in those cases, I think we should allow meters because it's to our advantage to have those separately metered. New construction of multiple household units in a single building will require separate water meters. If an additional household unit is constructed on an existing lot that has a water tap, this new structure must be provided with an additional water meter. So this is my understanding. If I had this person who called us that wanted to buy this lot and put a modular in it, and we're not going to get into the modular building code. But if she had had a tap, I would have said yes. She could build it because she had a tap. The problem was that there's apparently no tap because we never heard from her again. If an additional housing unit is constructed on an existing lot that has a water tap, the new structure must be provided with an additional water meter. So you get the gist of this, but you know, that's where the hang up has been for us.
Yes.
So I have one procedural question. What does it cost to get a meter? I have no idea.
A meter.
A meter, because you have to pay to get the meter.
So we just had this discussion because of this woman is that usually that's not specified in our code needs a lot of help. And poor Corey comes to me and says, so is she supposed to get the meter? So, you know, they have a certain kind of meter they want. So what I suggested, this was my on the cuff, not in the code answer. Tell her that we'll buy the meters for her and she reimburses us. And then you get the meters that we need. And then she has to have them installed. Because they're on her private property. But we got to fix all that. There's more stuff to fix than just this.
Yeah, So now what I'm hearing is that we're going to have a two-legged stool. And go with the first exception in Nick's memo, which is on page 6. And that exception is create an exception for the extension of water delivery pipes on properties already connected to the town's water distribution system. Only when such extension would not trigger a requirement of a larger service line. So that is getting at the issue of the extra bathroom. We are not going to. So my draconian approach, I'm buttressing that now, would not be in effect if we took that first requirement, that first exception, but we said no new meters, no new taps.
So the way it would happen if everybody play by the rules is that if someone wanted a new bathroom, they would go to the building inspector and the building inspector would require would make sure that the tap was sized to serve that unit. And if that unit, say, you know, if a 3/4 inch covered that extra bathroom, then okay. If it didn't and it requires a larger tap, we would not sell them to them. So they wouldn't be able to get the bathroom.
Right. And this was brought up in some attorney's memo. Our current code does not provide for the town requiring anything greater than 3/4 inch on residential. And that needs to be fixed. Right, we can do it for commercial and that is a town authority decides that, but
It's actually.
No, I actually saw
it's right above,
have to be sized.
it's right above the table of in chapter 13.
Yeah, but I said something about taps being sized for the Keep it up, you know.
And I, let's see, that was it was in a confidential memo from Nick.
That was me. Yeah, I'll explain that. So the only thing that it says with regard to residential taps is the basic residential, and then in parentheses, 3/4 inch water tap fee in town is $6,000 for each water tap. And then it goes on to speak about commercial water taps and sizing, but doesn't say anything else about when a residential development or property would require a larger than 3/4 inch tap.
Yes. Don't let me, okay.
Yeah, that's in section 13-1-30, part A. Reads each property owner, parentheses, residential and commercial, connecting a water service line for their property to any water line constructed or owned by the town shall pay a water tap fee prior to being permitted to connect the main water line. The tap, water service line, and meter shall be sized according to either the existing and or proposed use.
Yeah, so that,
Right, that's covered.
that's what I remember.
And then also, I just had it, the meter, cost. The installation cost is also in here, there's a part where it says it's whatever the installation meter cost is to be paid for, by the user.
Is that established by the trustees?
I think we're selling that cost,
Yeah. It's,
which maybe we should.
yeah, installation cost is, part, actually the same section 13-1-30 part I, installation costs. All costs of installation equipment and materials related to the servicing of the water tap to be installed will be paid by the purchaser upon invoice by the town of Paonia of any such taps in connection with the town water system.
All right,
So we're covered for those.
all right. Anything else by the board? It sounds, well, we have a motion by Thomas.
You say it like that.
So long ago, Thomas, we lost Dave. You want us to vote on your thing?
No, I'll withdraw it. So somebody else can do better.
Okay, would somebody like to make a motion about no taps, no meters?
Second withdrawal, okay?
Yeah, I'll make that one.
Okay,
Okay,
stated.
I move that we don't allow any additional meters, commercial or residential.
Okay.
Unless there's an established unit already that predated this ordinance.
Yeah, unless there, and that's covered, yes, unless there's a pre-established.
Okay. All right, second,
I'll second that.
any further discussion from the board? Yes, Thomas.
Okay, so there's no additional meters,
Correct.
and we're trusting that people will not, we're not gonna have any gorilla.
We're gonna have roommates.
Have gorilla roommates.
Yeah. you're gonna have to-
That's what, like what Dave pointed out, is that you're gonna be interested to see how people obey what we do right here.
No matter what.
Okay, so basically what we're saying is new construction. Legal new construction within town limits.
Yeah.
Which also raises another thing that I had on mind. What are we doing about out of town users?
It's the same thing, they're under the same requirements. When,
Right.
if you buy a tap from the town, you bind yourself to the town water ordinances if you're out of town.
There is a question I have about that in reading through this, because I also saw a little clause that was very interesting. It said that if you have a water tap outside of the town, you will be inspected by the town inspector and billed according to us and need a building permit from the town.
That actually was taken off the requirements by.
It's there.
No, it's
It's there.
It's still there.
Yes.
Still
We put it
there.
in.
We put it in.
I heard it was not taken off.
Oh, no, I have it highlighted. It's here.
I know. When I read this today, I
Well,
was
then,
what?
there's lots of, well, there's a couple, 3 buildings outside of town that have.
Let me finish.
So more than.
So there's a couple questions. Can I finish? There's a couple questions about that. First of all, what are we in the tap from out of town and the extension of sewer lines or water lines out to out of town water companies when we don't even have intergovernmental agreements
Right.
or MOUs with those water companies? How do we know? Like the one that's being built right across from where the school is up the hill. Did they get a water tap? Were they in service? Maybe it's great.
We've dealt with this before, and I think this does go back to Leslie saying we need IGAs with all of our
Absolutely.
water companies, because otherwise, but we have had problems with illegal taps, where the actual water company approached us about one of their users, illegally extending the tap. And what we did, we had no jurisdiction, it was out of town. We, had a county sheriff there as well as a public works person dug it up, cut it and charged them.
So, yeah,
But it's rare that we actually catch it and
Yes,
do it.
very
We don't monitor it. That's the enforcement piece.
right, exactly. Okay, we have a motion and a second to not allow any new meters unless pre-existing before the moratorium. All right. Comments from the public? Usual rule, 3 minutes each. Would like to. Yes.
So I'm kind of confused what you're voting on.
Oh, okay.
And so if there's a property that has an existing tap, are you voting they can't get a meter, or are you saying they can?
Not gonna be.
So they bought that property in good faith, thinking they could develop it. Now they can't.
Correct.
For a second unit, their original unit.
So this is for first unit.
Yeah.
So they could get a meter.
It's
If they have a water tap.
right,
It's correct. That's what it's- Water and sewer.
right.
Yeah, thanks.
Anyone else? Yes.
I don't know where that's been, Bill.
So I wrote the moratorium, and so, it's really interesting, watching people's revelations when they read the ordinance. Congratulations. I would encourage you all to sit down and actually read it. And it's interesting, it's really an exercise in object permanence, trying to grok all this stuff. And none of these ordinances exist in isolation. They're all in the code, and there's water and there's sewer and there's zoning, and they all mingle, and you have to take them together. The thought with the thing about service lines, and I would put forth the idea that service line and water delivery line are not mutually exclusive. I find it an exercise that uselessness trying to really distinguish between them, but if there's a legal imperative, good luck with it. But the idea was to not add load on the system. And so not extending the line was one, to stop Ken Knight from running a water line out to Riverbank. So it's all ready to go. So he can find some loophole and start hooking up new units. And meters required for a unit. The town owns the line to the meter. So the town can't extend the line to a meter. Was the thinking behind it. Now, if I muck the language in there, or the attorney that I hired to help with it muck the language, apologize, and I really appreciate the energy to straighten it out. But other thoughts after listening to you, could add an extra duplex if you're going to increase the size of the line. That's the sale of the tap. I think you've all agreed on that. The line to the meter is an extension of the water delivery pipeline. Increasing the size of the line, as I said, is a sale of a new tap to have a bigger line. One of the reasons that this is a little bit confusing is I was on the board when in 2017, when the current water ordinance was last updated. And that session where that happened, it was very specifically stated, because I asked one question: is it your intent that everybody hooking up a sink in the garage has to buy a new tap? And the answer was yes. That was the intent under Charles Stewart, and that was passed. I thought it was a little draconian, but that's what went down. And like you said, that's what you got. However, reading the code now, it wasn't really implemented very clearly.
Right, your time is up, so.
I would ask the board for an extra time, being the person that got this whole thing
Want to
going.
make a motion to give Bill more time?
Define 3 more minutes.
I'd like to give Bill 5 more minutes.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
But so that's the place where I missed, because I kind of trusted that what they had passed had gotten into the rules, and it didn't. Okay, so. I think the pertinent comment there is that you should be getting an extra tap fee for every additional unit. I think you're leaving tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table by not doing it. I think there's this there's business of tap here and meter there. And there should be a charge for both of them, because it's the ante end of the system, and everybody on the system today either bought a tap or paid, reimbursed the person they bought the property from for that tap. But new people coming into town, buying a place and using the water should be anteing into that system. It's a matter of fundamental fairness. So you're leaving money behind by confusing tap and meter. I think you should look at that. And I really think you're on the right track by asking the professionals to give you the language to enforce your intent, instead of sitting around till midnight trying to hash out the ordinance yourself. So congratulations on that. A year's not enough data on the water system, especially given we've got a wet year going on right now. And I would ask you, while you're reading those ordinances, to read the sewer ordinance. It is much more clearly written and I think it's in the water ordinance too, but it's definitely in the sewer ordinance, that every dwelling unit that has a kitchen has to have its own sewer line and buy a sewer tap. And I don't think that's been recognized, and it's not been happening. And there are multiple new units in town that I don't think have done that. And there's language in there that when they're reported, the town staff will investigate and report to the board on that status. And so I'm reporting them right now. And I ask you to look into that. But I think that the sewer ordinance could be used as guidance on rehashing the water ordinance, which is beyond the scope of what you're doing today. You're sticking your finger in the dike. But it's much more clearly written, and it's very clear that everybody has their own pipe, their own tap, and they pay for it. So I think you're on the right track, and thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah.
Ms. Rosen?
Oh, yes, Ms. Rosa.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to comment that the water system needs so many repairs, and I think that's really the crux of the issue here. I appreciate that you want to correct the wording, and that's really important. While there is a water moratorium, and I understand that you do need to keep that going for a while longer, but the pressing issue is that we need to fix our water system and allow more taps and do away with this moratorium, because that's really essential to improving the situation in the town financially. I think we do need to bring more people in. I think that it would be good for the town. I think you should be able to allow a certain number of additional, auxiliary dwelling units if people really want them. And it all depends on the water. It's been said, water is life. Some cultures say water is wealth. Okay. So we have the water. We just have to be able to use it and provide it. So, that's just me encouraging everybody, and as part of the water committee also, I know we're doing a lot of work towards this. We're making progress, and I appreciate that. But that, to me, is the big issue, is to make the best use of the water that we have available to us. And we are losing a lot of that water, not just from the clock plant, but the Lamborn plant is also still losing water. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes,
Sorry, could you repeat that motion again?
sure.
Thanks.
The motion is don't allow any meters unless pre-existing before the moratorium.
And what about the distribution line, the service line?
No, we're not addressing the service lines. Yes. Okay.
I would like to make a motion to that after we're all done with this.
Okay,
That's what I wondered, if there was going to be some sort of second motion, because,
all right.
okay, thank you.
So we have a motion and a second on the table.
No, I was.
Oh, you want to do a
new-
separate
A new
motion. All right,
motion, yeah,
all in
sorry,
favor?
sorry. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion passes. Yeah, okay.
Well, here's what I'm asking. So Nick and Leslie are gonna work on literally revising the definition of tap. I'm assuming here to accommodate the meter. I'm not quite sure where this is gonna be put, but I want to get back to, it looks like we are leaning towards Nick's first bulleted suggestion, which is the exception. Trying to get back to that on page 6. So I feel like if we leave this, tap should also include the extension of water delivery pipes, which has been completely misconstrued and nobody really understands what it means. I think it would be beneficial to everyone if we clarify that we are not precluding the extension of your on-property delivery water pipes on properties already connected to the town's system. The way he's doing this, because I think we don't want to tell, right now, I think we're saying if you had a new bathroom, you don't need another meter.
Right.
So are we saying that we're okay with somebody adding another bathroom in their existing structure? That does not violate zoning, it doesn't violate anything. They just want to add a bathroom to their house. This, to me, the moratorium precluded that. Do we want to give an exception for people adding more water use in their existing structure that does not create another household unit?
To me, adding another bathroom isn't adding water use. Because again, if you're not adding people in the house that are using more water, then how can adding a bathroom be adding water use? Yes.
And one way to regulate that, and I'm not taking a stand, I'm just giving you more information. You know, when Dan looks at a building permit, the size of the tap comes into play, and that's what Thomas read, that you have to have the tap size to the uses, and that adding bathrooms does add to taps, because the building code doesn't care how many people live there, it cares how many water using facilities are there. So if, for instance, someone wanted to add they had a bathroom, they're going to add another bathroom, but they still stay at the 3/4 inch tap range, you might want to allow it. But if it triggers the 1 inch tap, then they're out. So, but that's up to you. You know, if you want to just totally restrict any more water using facilities, you could do that too.
Yes.
And the point of what I was saying is I think we do want to allow someone to add a bathroom as long as it doesn't increase the tap.
Yeah.
We are allowing this language that has been considered quite incongruent with the rest of the code. We're allowing that to stay here. And which to me just continues the consternation about what is okay. So I would like to clear up this last phrase in the definition of tap as to what is permissible. So you're not getting phone calls. Can I add a bathroom in my house?
Yeah.
Leslie.
So I'm going to add another, this is just for your general information. So Jeremiah came to me this morning because I'm keeping Jordan and he and Corey all informed about all this, and he said, well, he wanted to know more about what triggers a larger tap. So what I told him is it's going to take a while for this moratorium language to kick in because of the ordinance change, you know, the noticing and all that stuff. That on the staff level, we're going to take a look at that so we can explain that to you better, because he's not quite sure, and I'm sure Dan will have some input to that, so we can bring some more information about when that trip happens, that it goes from a 3/4 inch tap to a 1 inch tap.
Yeah, it seems to me that when we hit the 1 inch tap, then it changes. That's a new tap, and so that we're clear to.
Right, and so I know I'm sorry I monopolized, but my point is to show that we are giving a concession. to the original draconian approach, which is you can add a work sink as long as you don't need a tap in your existing structure. As long as you don't need a larger tap. And I don't know how to word that, but I feel like that would be helpful to the interpretation of the moratorium and what people can and can't do. And it would help Dan if somebody says, I want to add a work sink and it doesn't need a bigger tap. Is that, and that's okay?
So I probably would word it that way. What I would say is that 3/4 tab, you can have these many watering. But 1 inch, then you can have this many. I mean, I've been interpreting these codes for over 40 years. I started this when I was 3. And so that's kind of how I would do it.
No, I don't know what the wording should be, but I feel like
It's all very boring. It's the stuff that you would read if you were having some.
So is this something that should be written into the code, or is this something that isn't in?
Well, I think that's what Jeremiah said, that we need to revisit. Is that clear when you have to upgrade a tap? So that we're going to work on that while this ordinance just changes. And we'll bring more information back to you.
Right now on this? Do we need to do anything more on this right now?
No, because you don't have the information yet for anything.
in order to make this an intelligent motion.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm imagining a scenario, we use Dave's, trustee Jason's house as an example. Say he has his 1 bathroom at this time and, he has, say, 1 spare room right now, 1 kitchen, and, adding a bathroom, he does not trigger the need for an additional tap size, right, or a line size. So he's still good on a 3/4 line. But what he can do at this point is install an additional bathroom. And bring on a boarder or roommate, thus increasing the load on our system. And none of that would be addressed by anything we've done yet today.
Correct.
Well, and in that vein, if you're married and you have a child, you're bringing out another user. So we can't really.
I'm not saying that without judgment. I just want to make sure clear that like, that's something we're aware of that is still possible.
Yes.
Trustee Marcos bringing up a good point. It's going to be, and this is what I said before, it's going to be interesting to see how people get on this because it's going to be impossible for us to regulate this behavior so strictly that there will not be any possible workarounds. There's going to be workarounds. Staff's going to do a pretty good job about I have confidence they're going to do a pretty good job about figuring out the sizes and coming back to us once we have good information about that. And I'm real happy that we've tackled this by using meters because I think that's really smart.
Yes.
One of the ways that we've done that historically was rather than try to run around and enforce everything, we made a very steeply increasing rate for usage. So that, for example, if you put in a hidden apartment and you're doubling your usage, all of a sudden your water just goes up a whole bunch. And that was how we controlled it out of town.
Wait, no, we don't do that.
I'm not doing anything to him.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is not as if we do not have citizen comment right now. We have citizen comment when we have a motion on the table. We don't have a motion. Okay, good. Anything else?
I want to finish just one thing.
Yeah.
That's with Paige. You weren't clear. I think you had a great idea, but didn't have clear language to implement for it. You can always instruct the attorney and pass the ball to him and make him do the work.
It sounds like we will get language to that effect after the staff and Leslie and Nick. But well, I have one last question, which is a procedural question. Do you get, if you have 2 meters, do you get 2 base rates on your bill?
Yes,
So a meter constitutes a base rate.
yes, and it's a separate account.
I have to tell you, I have a very unusual situation in my house, but I won't bring it up now.
That's why this woman who has an apartment building that was never metered wants to meter it. Because right now she's paying the bill and she wants her renters to be able to pay.
And they will be paying a base rate and they're using.
Okay. Anything else? Yes, Dave.
In coming into this meeting, I was a little concerned about the fact that it's afternoon on a work day. A lot of citizens can't be part of the process here. What makes me feel more comfortable is we're giving guidance to come back to a regular meeting. So we'll be making the decision then. So I want to be really clear that as a board, we're not trying to hide anything or lack transparency. We're trying to hash through this stuff. But this isn't the final decision, and citizens can still come and talk about it.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Martin.
One thing topic that came up early, actually first in this discussion, was the potential sale of the VOTEC building and the tenants associated with that. I just want to make sure everybody's aware that that is not zoned for anything except public use.
Right, yeah, there's a lot going on with that. We'll have it come in.
People are very aware that they need to get something.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
One of the things that we haven't really, we've touched on it, but we haven't delineated and stated it clearly that every residence says freestanding residence needs a water and sewer tap.
Yeah.
And that includes mother-in-law apartments. And we're going to have to do it that way. And the reason being is that tap feed feeds into the water system. And the sewer tap goes into the sewer system. And this is the way that we can expand and correct our system. It's not really fair to the people that are now, they've paid the taps and they're paying their water bill. And now we have a lot of guerrilla units that are not being billed on a separate rate. They don't pay a base fee. They pay for the water, and that's the cheapest part of this. And they didn't pay in for their tap, for their use. And that's how we make the system work. You buy in, and that's how it should be, in my opinion.
All right, anything else?
I have one last thing to say.
But you said that before.
I didn't say that. Here it is. We have. Our code is a mess.
Yes.
Chapter 18, 16 has dwelling units. Chapter 13 has household units. They are completely contradictory. So I don't know. I think right now you're focusing on just the moratorium piece, but at some point we have got to get the attorney to clean up these two chapters.
Actually, Leslie, when she leaves, we'll clean it up for her.
Yeah, I'm gonna suggest that you have a land use planner start with it and then the attorney reviews it, because to have the attorney do it is gonna be really expensive and that's cheap.
Yeah, but thank you, but you know exactly what I'm referring to.
Oh,
And everything, it's a mess.
crazy. People call in and they want an answer and I'm like going,
Here, you decipher what this says.
And to speak on her behalf, that's where Corinne got in trouble, because there are conflicting, that in the minor subdivision thing, it both says the administrator can approve them and it has to go to the board. Both things.
Yep. All right, if there's nothing else, then I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.